What is going on, Raider Nation? It's your boy Sanjit back at it with another video. The Raiders had another practice today, and we're going to talk about some of what we're hearing from practice. Charles Grant has apparently been putting a lot of effort into becoming a solid NFL player, and we're going to talk about this. Plus, some people have talked a little bit about Micah Parsons, who requested a trade. I want to kind of give my thoughts and opinions on if the Raiders should pursue a potential Micah Parsons trade. We're going to talk about this. We'll start right away with Charles Grant, a guy that I was really high on pre-draft. And if you guys followed me on Twitter specifically, even in some of these videos that I made before the draft, Charles Grant was a guy that I personally really liked. I had a statement that I said that some people thought was kind of wild, which I didn't think it was wild at all. But, I said Charles Grant may be a first-round pick. He may be a top 15 pick if he's healthy and if he's able to play at the Senior Bowl. Obviously, he was not. He had an injury, and because he wasn't able to go to the Senior Bowl, he ended up being a third-round pick, and the Raiders took him at pick 99. And we're now at the point where the Raiders have to develop this guy a little bit, right? Especially if they want him to be the tackle of the future. But Charles Grant has started to practice a little bit, and we haven't heard a whole lot, but we did get some updates coming out today. He did his presser, and Charles Grant actually said his welcome to the NFL moment came on the first day of pads when he looked across the line and saw Maxx Crosby coming at him. Of course, we all know Maxx Crosby loves to give rookie players their welcome to the NFL moment, right? I believe Michael Mayer said that Maxx Crosby gave him his. Brock Bowers said the same thing. Of course, Charles Grant is now saying the welcome to the NFL moment for him was when Maxx Crosby lined up across from him. Now, we do have to understand Charles Grant has been taking second-team snaps with the second team unit, right? Or he's been taking left tackle snaps with the second team unit. I'm excited for Charles Grant. I'm excited to see this guy's development a little bit. Now, we've seen Charles Grant working at left tackle. We've seen this guy taking those snaps. He's also been getting a lot of work in with Kolton Miller. Over the past couple of days, there's been a lot of videos coming out where like Kolton Miller and Charles Grant are together essentially talking, right? And you can tell Kolton Miller is kind of coaching him up. Here's one. This one came actually yesterday. And there's another video which actually came from earlier today. And once again, right, Charles Grant, you can see is kind of getting into his stance. Kolton Miller's talking to him. You can see Charles Grant getting vertical. To me, it's a really good sign right here. And I do find it interesting, right, that Kolton Miller is coaching this kid, at left tackle, which kind of means that Charles Grant is going to eventually take over for Kolton Miller. There's also that chance that Charles Grant jumps to left guard. I know Dylan Parham's locked in to start for the Raiders this season, but he is also in his final year. And I could also see Charles Grant jumping to left guard. The Jets drafted Olu, I believe, a year and a half ago. And when they drafted him, he was supposed to be their future left tackle. I think he's like the 9th or 10th overall pick. And what they ended up doing was because they had already signed Tyron Smith, they basically made Olu a backup left tackle. But I believe at some point in the season, their left guard goes down and he jumps into left guard. Their right tackle goes down. Olu jumps in at right tackle. Tyron Smith goes down, and then Olu kind of takes over at left tackle for him. And he ended up getting hurt as well, but he looked really good when he got to that left tackle position. And a part of that was because he developed that guard. He developed that tackle, right? He got those snaps, but he was also not expected to be a day one starter. And I think for the Raiders, taking that same approach with Charles Grant, it's the right way to go with this guy, right? Don't put too much expectations on him. Let him develop. Let him have snaps as well, right? Put him in that guard this season. Chances are Dylan Parham's going to end up missing some time, right? He's missed time over the past seasons. Chances are he might miss some time this season as well. And if he does, I hope Charles Grant ends up getting that opportunity. And then I also hope the Raiders develop Charles Grant long-term to replace Kolton Miller. Kolton Miller signed a 3-year contract, which now means he's here for 4 years. But chances are only the next 2 years are going to be guaranteed. By the time year 3 comes around, right, literally 3 years from this season, it'll be Charles Grant's third season. We could probably trade Kolton Miller at that point if we chose to do that. Obviously, I think it'd make more sense to let Kolton Miller just play left tackle for the rest of his career, 5, 6, 7 years potentially, given he's only 29 years old. And eventually, if the right tackle does not develop, right, if DJ Glaze doesn't get to like Kolton Miller's level, or not even Kolton Miller, but like if DJ Glaze doesn't become a good starting caliber tackle, maybe you can move Charles Grant over to right tackle, or alternatively, maybe just put him at left guard and let him play guard. I think Charles Grant has the potential to be a top tier guard based off of some of the college tape that we've seen. That's potential, right? That's not like Jackson Powers Johnson, who's already shown it, right? It's a little bit different. But I'm excited, man. I'm excited to watch Charles Grant this season. We're a couple days away from the preseason game. And he's the guy that I'm going to be really, really, really focused in on. I think he's the guy that I'm probably most excited for when it comes to the rookie players, even more so than Ashton Jeanty, which is kind of crazy. But I'm excited for Charles Grant as we kind of get there. There's a couple other updates I want to just kind of get into. We'll also talk a little bit about some of the guys that are requesting trades. Jermaine Pratt did his presser today as well. Jermaine Pratt on why he decided to join the Raiders. Pratt said, I've always looked up to Pete Carroll. The style of play on defense he plays, I've always wanted to play for a coach who has a defensive mindset. It's an interesting thing coming from Pratt, given that with the Bengals over the last 3 years, he's had an offensive-minded coach. And, I think for Jermaine Pratt, one of the things with this scheme and system is it fits him really well because it's a simple defense. So Pratt could be a downhill player. And when he's not coming downhill in passing situations, he's mostly going to be dropping right into the mid hooks, right? He's not going to have to drop, into the vertical or the flats. He might sometimes, but mostly he'll be playing right in the middle of the defense. And if he's playing on the strong side, then he'll be lined up over a tight end. And to me, he's one of those guys that understands passing lanes, right? He's one of those guys that understands how to get into those and make it hard for a quarterback, right? If a quarterback's trying to get a 6-7 yard pass off, he's the type of guy to take that lane away. And I think in the Pete Carroll scheme and system, this guy's going to end up having a lot of success. I think it makes it a lot easier for linebackers. I'm excited for Jermaine Pratt. I think he'll be a really good player for the Raiders. We have a couple other updates that are coming out. During 7-on-7 red zone drills, quarterback Geno Smith went 6 for 7 with a touchdown to Jacoby Myers. He also threw a touchdown to Michael Mayer. One of the things that a lot of people have reported the past couple of days is that Geno Smith has been absolutely on fire, which is not surprising to me. I believe it was the first day or maybe the second day. There were some people that were saying hey, Geno Smith holds on to the ball too long. He struggles at times. At least in practice, that's what he was kind of doing. And then it seems like he took that personally a little bit, right? And then it seems like he came out there and he's been having really, really, really good production. I want to see Geno Smith continue to do this. Obviously, today there were no pads. So the Raiders were out there with essentially shells, which is what they were doing 2 weeks ago. But we're going to start to ramp it up a little bit, right? Preseason's literally right around the corner. Another good update coming out. Devin White had a play he made today. Apparently, he got through the line of scrimmage for a would-have-been sack. But Geno Smith still launched it for a big game to Ian Thomas. Of course, it's practice. You're not taking down the quarterback. The play continues. Throw up those 50-50 passes. This one's kind of interesting because Devin White is known as a guy that blitzes. He's known as a guy that's going to come find the quarterback. And what's interesting about this play is this guy's done this a lot over the course of his career. But, the guy that I speak to told me that, he saw the Raiders practicing this specifically, right? Devin White blitzing. And it wasn't just White, it was a couple other guys too, but he noticed it with Devin White specifically, he's coming downhill, he's blitzing. And I don't know if this is a bad sign either, right? Did the offensive line not pick up the blitz? Did the Raiders simulate pressure? We don't know, but it's a good thing and it's kind of a bad thing as well. But I do like Devin White in blitz situations. If the Raiders are in a 3rd and 10, we're going to be expecting, or you should expect, I should say, the Raiders to blitz, try to get after the quarterback. With Devin White being out there, of course, I think Jamal Adams will blitz a lot as well. He's another guy that's, gotten to the quarterback. And I wonder if bringing in Jamal Adams and Devin White to blitz and get sacks on the quarterback was something that the Raiders thought of, hey, we want to be a blitz-heavy team. I always, have thought this, and I always say this. The best way to force turnovers is by getting pressure on the quarterback. And, there's a difference between, pressure with, 3 or 4 guys rushing the quarterback, and then the quarterback kind of feels pressure and he throws it. It's different when a guy blitzes off the edge, right? That's a different type of clock for a quarterback. When there's pressure from the pass rush, where the defensive guys are kind of lined up as a quarterback. Where you're going to put the ball. Pre-snap, most of the time, you kind of know what you're going to do. But when a guy blitzes, things are changing. Guys are rotating. One guy comes, one guy drops back, and then the clock speeds up. Right? Some quarterbacks are great against blitzes. Some guys really, really, really struggle. as a defense, blitzing's really hard. It's not Madden, right? It's not one of those things where like every area is still covered. When you blitz, you're really putting your defense at a disadvantage. But when you have good blitzers, right, like Devin White, Jamal Adams, that's a huge advantage. And I wonder if the Raiders are going to be one of the higher blitz rates this season as they kind of get into it. Some of the teams that force the most turnovers are often teams that are heavy blitz type of teams, right? So it's going to be interesting this season, right? Our defense can be really, really interesting. We got 3 more updates that I want to get into. These are going to be a little bit more so of things I really want to get into. Today, for the very first time, Jackson Powers-Johnson took snaps with the second team unit. And it got a lot of people scratching their heads like, why the hell is Jackson Powers-Johnson with the second team unit? And I want to talk about this because some people think there's a chance Jackson Powers-Johnson does not start for the Raiders. And I don't personally think this is what that means, right? I don't think Jackson Powers-Johnson taking second team snaps means he's not going to start for the Raiders, especially given this was a non-padded practice. So obviously Alex Cappa was in at right guard with the first team, and then Jordan Merritt was still with the ones at the center. And essentially Jackson Powers-Johnson came in with the second team unit. I think the Raiders look at this situation as this, right? I think the Raiders feel like, hey, we want to see which player is better. Is Jordan Meredith the better center, or is Alex Cappa the better guard? Which guy is the better football player? Which guy can start? And then whichever guy ends up winning, right? If Meredith's the better center, if Kappa's the better guard, something tells me the Raiders will just kind of roll with that option, and then they'll basically take Jackson Powers-Johnson and fill him in the opposite spot, right? So if Alex Cappa outperforms Jordan Meredith, it'll be Jackson Powers-Johnson starting at center. If Jordan Meredith outperforms Alex Cappa, then it'll be Jackson Powers-Johnson at right guard. And I say that because Jackson Powers-Johnson is an elite football player. And I don't think people will understand this concept. I could put on tape of Jackson Powers-Johnson for like 10 minutes where he's just throwing people. He's moving people like 5, 6, 7 yards. He's taking these elite angles to cut people off. What Jackson Powers-Johnson does on tape, it's absolutely unique. You don't get that type of offensive lineman to dominate the way he does, and he does it in so many different ways. He does it physically, he does it with technique, he does it with every different element you can think of. And he did it, he did it at center, he did it at guard. And to me, Jackson Powers-Johnson, the fact that he's really, really young, I think he's 22 years old at this point. He has 3 years left on his rookie contract still. I would be shocked if Jackson Powers-Johnson does not start. And if he does not start for whatever reason, to me, that talks more about the coaching staff than it does about Jackson Powers-Johnson. Now, the only thing, and I'm going to just throw this out there, that I could see potentially happening here. If Jackson Powers-Johnson does not start, if you guys remember, there was a situation that happened with like Antonio Pierce and Jackson Powers-Johnson way back when it happened. I think it was like in camp at some point. Jackson Powers-Johnson was like sitting out for a little bit. If you guys remember, there was a situation that kind of happened, and obviously he ended up returning and everything was good as they kind of went forward. But for a little bit, there was something that kind of happened, and we don't really know what that was. We know Powers-Johnson may have had some sort of head injury at that point, right? It may have been like a concussion. But the only thing I could really think of if the Raiders really don't start Jackson Powers-Johnson, which again, I don't think is necessarily what's going to happen here, is there something more to it non-football related. Maybe he doesn't understand a concept, which I find that hard to believe given his tape. Maybe he's not coachable, which again, I find hard to believe given his attitude. We see him talking on the Maxx Crosby podcast. He does interviews and he does all these different things, and nothing seems off to me personally. But, the fact that he's working with the number 2 unit, some people actually think this means he might not start for the Raiders. And again, if he doesn't start for the Raiders, I'd be shocked. I'd be really, really, really shocked given his tape. And I'll just end it with this. I create football content on a YouTube channel called The Football Scout. It's my second YouTube channel, right? It's not this Raiders channel. It's a completely different channel. It has 81,000 subscribers. And I started it like 2 or 3 years ago. And on that YouTube channel, I literally mostly talk about offensive line, defensive line. And the point of that channel is for me to break down other teams that are not Raiders related, right? So like the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Seahawks, the Niners, and just a bunch of other teams in the NFL. I basically talk about some of their offensive linemen. I'll talk about Tyler Smith for the Cowboys. I'll talk about, Jordan Mailata for the Eagles or Landon Dickerson for the Eagles, Tyler Steen for the Eagles, right? Whichever player it is, I'll talk about it on the Football Scout channel, but I don't just talk about random guys. Like, I watch tape and I break down tape with these different guys. And I say all that to say this, I watch a lot of NFL tape of a lot of different players, right? There's not a lot of players that start that I have not watched tape on, right? And some of these guys I watch every single week, right? There's probably like 8 teams where I watch every single game of those offensive lines. And I am telling you guys, Jackson Powers-Johnson is among the very, very, very best player in the NFL on the offensive line. Center or guard, I think he's a better center, but he's still a really, really good guard as well. Powers-Johnson is one of the best, right? Creed Humphrey, to me, is the best center in the NFL. The Eagles have a great center as well. I think he's another guy who's one of the best. And I also think Jackson Powers-Johnson is like right there, right? I think he's one of the top 3 guys that I've watched on tape. Tyler Smith, phenomenal guard. Sam Cosmi is another really, really good guard for the Commanders. Chris Lindstrom's a really good guard as well. Powers-Johnson at guard is kind of right there as well, right? So, again, I talk about Jackson Powers-Johnson based off of watching this guy's tape, and I'd be very shocked if he somehow does not start for the Raiders. I think he's already our best offensive lineman. I think he becomes a top 5 player at whatever position he plays at some point this season. We'll see what ends up happening. I'm going to say this is a non-story until it becomes a story. Let's wrap it up. There's 2 guys that requested a trade. Terry McLaurin requested a trade. Jordan Schultz was the first one that reported that. And then, of course, Micah Parsons also just requested a trade. And the Micah Parsons trade just happened about 30 minutes ago. And I want to just talk about both of these guys because, to me, I think Terry McLaurin will probably end up re-signing with the Cowboys. But I think Micah Parsons might actually be done with the Dallas Cowboys. I'm sorry, McLaurin will sign with the Commanders. I think Micah Parsons may be done with the Cowboys. He goes through this entire detailed situation of what's kind of happened. And there's more on the back end if you guys don't know. Micah Parsons is actually represented by the same guy that represents Christian Wilkins, right? Same guy represents Christian Wilkins. Same guy represents Micah Parsons. I forget his name. I think it's Malaga might be his last. I forget his name. But that agent apparently has some issues with the Cowboys and Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones won't let that guy in the building. So Jerry Jones won't even work with that agent. So if you're represented by that agent, you're basically not coming to the Cowboys, right? And Jerry Jones apparently decided not to talk to the agent, and Micah Parsons is basically negotiating his own deal and then has to take that deal back to his agent. His agent's giving him insight, and it's basically this back and forth, and Micah Parsons detailed all of it in this entire thing that he just put on social media. But with that, he basically said that I'm leaving the Dallas Cowboys. He said, I will not sign with the Dallas Cowboys. And then, of course, Terry McLaurin has his situation, and he's requested a trade. But his trade is different, right? That just came through Jordan Schultz. Parsons is different. So let's talk about both of these guys for just a couple minutes. Should the Raiders try to trade for Terry McLaurin or for Micah Parsons? I'll be honest with you guys. I think Terry McLaurin makes the Raiders so much better, given that, we have Terry McLaurin now paired up with Jacoby Myers, with Brock Bowers, with Michael Mayer, with Ashton Jeanty. That essentially makes you arguably the best offense in the NFL on paper. Of course, they have to go out there and execute. But on paper, we would have the best offense, in my opinion, from a playmaker perspective. But if you go out there and get Terry McLaurin, you're likely losing Jacoby Myers, right? You're not going to sign him to an extension. You'll also end up losing Michael Mayer when that time comes, right? Because Terry McLaurin's going to want a 3 or 4 year contract, and he's going to want $30 million. The Raiders could make it happen for a year, but again, they'll lose some guys over the next couple of years. I think for the Raiders, it would be an interesting thing to bring in Terry McLaurin. I think he's a really good wide receiver, but also do note he is up there in age, right? I think he's like 30 years old at this point. I think for the Raiders, on the offensive side, they're still pretty damn good. I think they still have a top 10 offense on paper from a playmaker perspective. Ashton Jeanty, Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers. There's not a lot of 3 guys better than those 3 guys on any given offense. And that doesn't include Dante Thornton and Michael Mayer and Trey Tucker and some of the other guys who kind of have, right? I'm going to pass on Terry McLaurin, but Micah Parsons is a completely different situation. Now, you would have to give up a lot to bring in Micah Parsons. You'll also end up losing guys like Malcolm Koonce because you won't be able to pay both Parsons and Koonce. But think about this, man. The Raiders had all this money tied into Christian Wilkins. We saved some of it. Could the Raiders potentially use that to bring in Micah Parsons? And would it make sense, right? Because Khalil Mack went for like 2 first-round picks and I think a second-round pick on top of that. Micah Parsons will probably go for something around that as well. I think Parsons is one of the top three or four guys, right? Myles Garrett, Maxx Crosby, Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, those are the 4 best edge players in the NFL. Imagine Micah Parsons and Maxx Crosby and how great these guys can be together. Right? It is wishful thinking. We're probably not going to make it happen. It's going to cost a lot of money. But if I'm the Raiders and I'm making one trade right now to win a Super Bowl, Micah Parsons is the guy. Think about if you're like the Kansas City Chiefs, right? And you come out there and you're going to say, hey, we're going to go with 4 wide receivers. We'll have 1 running back in the backfield. You have Maxx Crosby on one side. You have Micah Parsons on the other. Which guy are you going to use that running back to chip with? Because if Micah Parsons is one-on-one, he beats pretty much anybody. If Maxx Crosby's one-on-one, he pretty much beats anybody. That running back can only pick one. Now, let's say you're the Chiefs and you say, we're going to chip both of these guys. Well, now you got to put a tight end in, a running back in, and both guys have to chip. You have less wide receivers going out there. And then you have Adam Butler, right? And are you going to slide to Adam Butler now as well? So it just adds a whole nother element for the Raiders defensive line. And then we could have potentially had this with Christian Wilkins, but obviously we saw that kind of ended. If I'm the Raiders, it is wishful thinking, but I would love for the Raiders to somehow get Micah Parsons. But again, I think it's wishful thinking. Do understand Micah Parsons and Maxx Crosby are also very, very, very close. So that's another thing to kind of just keep an eye on. If there's one thing that could potentially lead Micah Parsons to the Raiders, it would be his friendship with Maxx Crosby. In fact, he was wearing a Maxx Crosby shirt just yesterday to practice, right? And we'll see what ends up happening, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I would love for the Raiders to try to add talent, but I'm also a little wary on the fact that, sometimes this type of stuff doesn't ever work out, right? But again, we'll see what ends up happening. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.